The voicemail arrived at 4:23 a.m., which should have been my first warning that something was catastrophically wrong. Nobody calls with good news before sunrise, especially not my sister. Katie, I need you. Mom and Dad, something happened. The police are here and please, Katie, please come. Meredith's voice was raw with something I couldn't identify over the phone. Grief, panic, withdrawal. After 15 years of her addiction cycles, I'd learned that her crises blended together into an indistinguishable emergency that was somehow always urgent and never quite my responsibility to fix. But this time was different. This time, the police had been called. I was on the road to my parents' house by 5 a.m., my husband Simon still half asleep in the passenger seat, our 8-year-old daughter Zoe buckled safely in the back. The 2-hour drive from Portland to the small coastal town where I'd grown up felt both endless and far too short, because somewhere in my gut, I already knew. The voicemail, the timing, the police. I knew before the officer met me at the door with his practiced expression of professional sympathy. I knew before the words carbon monoxide poisoning. I knew before the explanation about the faulty water heater and the closed windows, and the fact that they'd gone to sleep and simply never woken up. My parents were gone. Both of them. Michael and Patricia Brennan, 68 and 66 years old, dead in the house where they'd raised 2 daughters who'd turned out so differently that people sometimes asked if we'd had the same parents. We had. Just one of us had been enough for them, and the other had required everything they had left over. Standing in that driveway at dawn, watching emergency vehicles and official personnel process the scene, I felt something I hadn't expected. Not grief. That would come later in waves that would nearly drown me. Not shock. I'd been preparing for a crisis call about my parents for years, though I'd always imagined it would be their hearts or a car accident or cancer, not something as random as a faulty appliance. No, what I felt first was rage. Because there, sitting on the porch steps in the clothes she'd clearly slept in, her hands shaking with whatever substance was leaving her system, was my sister Meredith, alive, awake, having spent the night at her friend's house instead of here. She'd survived. Again. While our parents, who'd spent decades trying to save her from herself, had died in a house they'd mortgaged twice to pay for her rehab attempts. Katie. She stood when she saw me, and I watched her face crumple. Katie, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I should have been here. I held up a hand, stopping whatever confession or excuse was coming. Because in that moment, looking at my 33-year-old sister who still had the dilated pupils and twitchy movements of recent drug use, I realized something that would define everything that followed. This was it. The moment our family had been building toward for 15 years, the catastrophic ending we'd all been pretending wouldn't come. And now that it had arrived, I was done. Done enabling, done accommodating, done pretending that my sister's addiction was a problem I had any power to solve. Our parents had spent everything, their money, their energy, their final years, trying to save Meredith from the consequences of her choices. I wasn't going to continue that legacy. What I didn't know then, standing in that driveway as dawn broke over the Pacific Ocean, was that my parents had made one final decision about how to save my sister. And it was going to cost me everything I thought I understood about fairness, family, and what inheritance really means. The will reading was scheduled for 2 weeks later. I spent those weeks planning a funeral, accepting casseroles from neighbors who'd known my parents for 40 years, and watching Meredith cycle through the predictable stages of addict grief. Intense emotion that needed immediate management, usually pharmaceutical. Promises to get clean now that Mom and Dad were gone. Disappearances for 6 to 8 hours, followed by tear-stained returns and vague explanations about needing space. Simon kept asking if we should stay longer, help get her into treatment, make sure she was okay. My husband, blessed with the privilege of never having an addict family member, still believed that care and concern could fix this, that someone just needed to try hard enough. She's 33 years old, I told him. She's been through 6 rehabs, 7 interventions, countless promises, and fresh starts. She doesn't want help, she wants enablement. And I'm not doing it anymore. But she's your sister, and she just lost her parents. We both just lost our parents. The The difference is I'm functioning through my grief without chemical assistance. He looked at me with something like concern then, as if my lack of patience with Meredith was a character flaw, rather than a survival mechanism learned through years of disappointment. The will reading took place in the office of Harold Weston, the attorney who'd handled my parents' legal affairs for 20 years. I arrived with Simon, dressed in the black suit I'd worn to the funeral. Meredith arrived 12 minutes late, in jeans and a sweater that had seen better days, her hair unwashed but her pupils surprisingly normal. Small victories. "Thank you both for coming," Mr. Weston began, settling behind his desk, with the careful formality of someone about to deliver bad news. "I want to start by saying that your parents agonized over this decision. They consulted with me multiple times over the past 3 years, revised their plans several times, and ultimately made choices they believed were in everyone's best interests." My stomach tightened. That preamble was never followed by straightforward inheritance distribution. "The will is dated 6 months ago and supersedes all previous versions. I'll spare you the legal language and give you the essential facts." He opened the folder in front of him. Michael and Patricia's estate consists primarily of their home, valued at approximately $680,000, retirement accounts totaling $320,000, and life insurance policies worth $400,000. After taxes and expenses, the net estate is approximately $1.3 million. I glanced at Meredith, who was sitting very still. A fortune like that could fund a lifetime of using or finally provide the treatment that might actually work. I already knew which option was more likely. "The distribution is as follows," Mr. Weston continued, and I heard the apology in his voice before the words even came. "The entire estate, including the house, accounts, and life insurance proceeds, is to be placed in trust for Meredith Brennan with the following conditions." Wait, the entire estate? I'd heard that correctly? "The trust will provide for her housing, medical care, including substance abuse treatment, and basic living expenses. Distribution will be managed by me as trustee, with Meredith having no direct access to principal or lump sum withdrawals. Upon Meredith's death or after 25 years, whichever comes first, any remaining assets will pass to Catherine Brennan Whitmore or her heirs." The words seemed to echo in the small office. The entire estate, in trust, for Meredith. What about me? The question came out smaller than I'd intended. "They left me nothing." Mr. Weston's face softened with genuine sympathy. "Your parents left you a letter. They asked me to read it after explaining the financial distribution." He pulled out another envelope. "But to answer your question directly, no, there is no current bequest to you. Your inheritance is conditional upon surviving your sister or waiting 25 years. 25 years, I was 35 years old. In 25 years, I'd be 60. My daughter would be 33. My parents had bet their entire estate on my Addict sister, either dying or making it to 58 years old before I could inherit a single dollar. This is..." I couldn't finish the sentence. Unfair, cruel, insane. All of those words felt simultaneously too harsh and not harsh enough. Meredith hadn't said anything. She was staring at her hands, her face unreadable. "The letter," Mr. Weston said gently, "might provide context." He began to read my parents' words, and with each sentence, I felt my understanding of their love shift beneath me like sand eroding under unexpected waves. "Dear Katie, if Harold is reading this, then we're gone, and you've just learned that we left everything to your sister. We can imagine your reaction, hurt, confused, angry, possibly convinced that we didn't love you as much as we loved Meredith, or that we valued her more, or that your years of stability and success meant less to us than her years of crisis and need. None of that is true, but we understand why it might feel that way. You need to understand something about being the parent of an addict. Every decision becomes impossible. Do you enable or do you enforce boundaries? Do you pay for another treatment program or do you practice tough love? Do you answer the 3 a.m. crisis call or do you let them face consequences? There are no good answers, only choices that feel slightly less terrible than the alternatives. For 15 years, we've watched Meredith destroy herself slowly. We've paid for rehabs that didn't work. We've believed promises that were broken before we'd even driven home from family sessions. We've mourned the daughter we thought we'd have while trying to love the daughter we actually got. And through all of it, we've wrestled with one terrible question. What happens to her when we're gone? You have a good life, Katie. You built a career, married well, created a stable home for Zoe. You have Simon's income, your own salary, a retirement plan, and the capability to create more wealth. You don't need our money. You might want it, want the validation it represents, want the fairness of equal distribution, but you don't need it for survival. Meredith does, not because she deserves it more, but because without it, she will be homeless within 6 months and dead within 2 years. That's not speculation. That's the reality of addiction statistics for women her age, with her history. We couldn't save her in life. We tried everything. Trust us. We tried. But maybe, just maybe, we can save her in death. The trust structure Harold has created isn't a gift. It's a lifeline. She can't spend the money on drugs because she won't have direct access. She'll have housing, healthcare, and basic needs met, while being required to participate in treatment as a condition of continued support. It's the best we could do. The only thing we could think of that might give her a chance to get sober when the grief of losing us hits, and the safety net of our enabling is finally completely gone. We know this hurts you. We know it feels like we're choosing her over you. But Katie, we're choosing survival over fairness. We're choosing the child who will die without help over the child who will be okay without it. That's the terrible math of parenting an addict. We love you. We're proud of you. We're sorry this is how it has to be. Please understand, even if you can't forgive. Mom and Dad, Mr. Weston, finished reading and set the letter down carefully. The office was silent except for the ticking of an old clock on the wall and my sister's quiet breathing. That's it, I heard myself ask. That's their explanation? That I don't need the money, so they're giving it all to her? They were trying to protect her, Mr. Weston said. They were enabling her. One more time, one final massive enablement that happens to be funded by money they earned during years I thought I was their daughter too. Katie, Meredith started. Don't. I stood, gathering my bag. Don't apologize. Don't defend. Them? Don't tell me you didn't ask for this. You've been asking for this your entire adult life. Every crisis, every plea for help, every promise to do better this time. You trained them to save you, and apparently they couldn't stop even in death. I know you're angry, Mr. Weston said. That's understandable. But the trust structure does offer some protection. For her, it offers protection for her. I looked at him directly. What about my protection? What about the protection of knowing that if I'd needed help, my parents would have been there? What about the message this sends to Zoe, that family rewards need over achievement? That the child who makes good choices gets nothing, while the child who makes terrible choices gets everything? Catherine, your parents agonized over this. I'm sure they did, from their position of having enough resources to agonize over. They didn't agonize over whether I could afford Zoe's college. They didn't agonize over whether Simon and I are carrying mortgage debt while trying to save for retirement. They just assumed, like everyone always assumes, that responsible people will figure it out while irresponsible people need to be saved. I walked to the door, then turned back to look at my sister. She was crying silently, tears running down her face, and I felt nothing. No sympathy, no connection, no sisterly urge to comfort her, just emptiness where family feeling used to be. Enjoy your inheritance, Meredith. Enjoy the house and the trust fund and the knowledge that even in death, Mom and Dad chose to save you instead of valuing me. I hope it's enough. I hope it finally fixes whatever's broken inside you, because it cost me any illusion that I mattered equally in their eyes. I left before anyone could respond, Simon hurrying after me. In the parking lot, I sat in the car and finally let myself cry. Not gentle tears of grief, but angry, guttural sobs of rejection and humiliation and rage at the unfairness of being the good daughter who got nothing while the addict got everything. We'll be okay, Simon said, his hand on my shoulder. We don't need their money. We're doing fine. But that was exactly the problem, wasn't it? We were doing fine, so we didn't deserve help. We were stable, so we didn't merit consideration. We'd made good choices, so we'd earned the privilege of receiving nothing. I didn't know then that my parents' final decision would crack something open in me that needed to break. That in trying to save my sister through money, they'd inadvertently freed me from something I didn't realize I'd been carrying. But that understanding was months away. First, I had to walk through the fire of discovering just how much poison had been building up in our family system for 15 years, and how much of it I'd been drinking without even noticing the taste. The first month after the will reading, I did what responsible people do. I processed my anger through therapy, supported Simon's attempts to mediate between me and Meredith, and maintained polite distance while the trust was established and my parents' house was prepared for my sister to move into. I did not, however, visit. I did not call. I did not check in to see how Meredith was handling grief while sober, which by all accounts was her current status. Mr. Weston sent updates. She'd entered an intensive outpatient program. She was attending daily meetings. She was seeing a therapist specialized in addiction and trauma. Good for her, I thought each time. Good for her that she finally has the resources for quality treatment. Good for her that our parents' death bought her another chance. Good for her that my inheritance is funding her recovery. You're becoming bitter, Simon observed one evening. That's not like you. How would you know what's like me? You've only known me in the context of having Meredith's addiction overshadow everything else. Maybe bitter is who I actually am when I'm not performing stable older sister. That's not fair. Fair? I laughed. And it sounded harsh even to my own ears. My parents left $1.3 million to my drug addict sister, and nothing to me because I was too stable to need it. I'm done caring about fair. Zoe started asking why we didn't visit Grandma and Grandpa's house anymore, why Aunt Meredith didn't come to her birthday party, why Mommy got quiet whenever someone mentioned the beach house where her grandparents used to live. I didn't have answers that were appropriate for an 8-year-old. How do you explain that love isn't always distributed equally? That sometimes parents have to make impossible choices? That your aunt's addiction required resources that made your inheritance disappear? You don't. You just say it's complicated and change the subject and model exactly the kind of avoidance that probably contributed to the family dysfunction in the first place. Month 2 brought a phone call from Mr. Weston. I thought you should know, Meredith has been sober for 60 days. She's doing well in treatment. She's asking if you'd be willing to attend a family session with her. No. Catherine, I understand you're angry, but she's genuinely trying. She's always genuinely trying. Then she relapses, and everyone who believed her feels stupid, and she cries and apologizes and promises this time is different. I've watched this cycle for 15 years. I'm not participating anymore. This might actually be different. The grief, the structure of the trust requiring treatment, the lack of enablers to fall back on. If she gets sober and stays sober, I'll be happy for her, from a distance. But I'm not investing emotional energy in another round of hope and disappointment. My parents already paid that cost. They literally paid it. I'm not adding to it. There was a long pause. Then, your parents wanted you to have something, beyond the eventual inheritance. They asked me to hold this until you seemed ready. Another envelope, another letter. I almost said no, almost refused to hear more explanations about why my sister's need outweighed my worth. But curiosity won. Read it, Katie. If Harold is giving you this letter, it means you're angry, hurt, feeling like we chose Meredith over you. We knew you would feel that way, which is why we wrote this separately from the first letter. There's something we never told you because we didn't want you to carry it. But now that we're gone, you need to understand the full picture. When Meredith was 15 and you were 17, she tried to kill herself. Pills from our medicine cabinet. Enough that if you hadn't come home early from your volleyball tournament and found her, she would have died. You don't remember because we told you she had stomach flu. But that was the moment we realized addiction wasn't her only battle. She had mental health issues that predated the drug use. Issues that made her vulnerable in ways you never were. Over the years, we've paid for more than rehab. We've paid for psychiatric care, for medication management, for specialized treatment programs that address both addiction and underlying mental illness. We've learned that Meredith's drug use isn't just about bad choices or weak will. It's self-medication for conditions that make basic functioning difficult, even on good days. We're not excusing her behavior, but we're explaining why we couldn't just practice tough love and walk away. Because unlike a pure addiction case, Meredith without support isn't just an addict who might bottom out and get help. She's a mentally ill woman who will likely die by suicide or overdose within months. You were never the problem, Katie. You were never less loved, but you were stable in ways that let us focus our crisis energy elsewhere. And we know that's unfair. We know that responsible children shouldn't be deprioritized just because they're not falling apart. But imagine if Zoe and a future second child both needed you desperately. One child had a broken bone, the other had cancer. You'd rush to the emergency with the cancer diagnosis, not because you loved that child more, but because the need was more urgent. That's what we've been doing for 15 years, triaging, making impossible choices, feeling guilty every single day about it. The trust isn't just about addiction. It's about keeping someone alive who has demonstrated repeatedly that she will not keep herself alive without structure and support. It's about knowing that our deaths will be a trigger for her suicidal ideation and hoping that the security of housing and treatment might buffer that response. We failed you by making you the strong one. We failed Meredith by not getting her help sooner before addiction took root. We failed as parents in dozens of ways we can't fix now. But please know, if the situation were reversed, if you were the one who needed everything to survive, we would have done the same for you. Not because we loved her less, but because we would move mountains for either of our daughters if they needed it. Meredith needed mountains moved. You needed parents who had energy left over after moving them. We're sorry we so rarely did. We love you. We're proud of you. We wish we could have been better for both of you. Mom and Dad, Mr. Weston finished reading, and I sat in silence, processing information that rearranged my entire adolescence. Meredith had tried to kill herself when she was 15. While I was at a volleyball tournament, completely unaware, my sister had been dying from an overdose, and my parents had lied to me about it. Why didn't they tell me? I asked finally. They thought they were protecting you, letting you focus on college applications and normal teenage life while they dealt with the crisis. They weren't protecting me. They were setting up a pattern where I didn't matter enough to know the truth about my own family. Catherine, mental illness doesn't excuse 15 years of manipulation and crisis. It explains it, maybe. Context isn't the same as absolution. I stood, feeling exhausted. Thank you for reading that, but it doesn't change my decision. Meredith has her inheritance, her trust fund, her treatment. She doesn't need me to. I left before he could argue, before I could let the new information soften the boundaries I'd built. Because here's what that letter really told me. My parents had been managing a crisis I didn't know about for 2 decades. They'd been carrying Meredith's mental illness and addiction while keeping me in the dark, making decisions about family resources without my input, and ultimately choosing to leave everything to the child they'd been saving all along. Learning that she'd tried to kill herself at 15 didn't make me feel more sympathetic. It made me feel more excluded. More proof that the real family drama happened between Meredith and our parents, while I floated in the periphery, useful for stability, but not trusted with truth. Month 4 brought an unexpected visitor. I answered the door one Saturday morning to find Meredith standing on my porch, looking healthier than I'd seen her in a decade. Clear eyes, normal weight, hair clean and styled. She was wearing nice jeans and a sweater that actually fit properly. I know you said you didn't want contact, she started, before I could close the door. But I'm not here to apologize or make excuses. I'm here to give you something. She held out an envelope. Not from our parents, from her. It's not emotional, it's practical. She set it on the porch railing. I'm 4 months sober. I've been working with a financial advisor Harold connected me with. We've been reviewing the trust structure and what I actually need versus what Mom and Dad allocated. Despite myself, I was curious. And they over-provided. Way over. The trust generates enough income to cover my needs with substantial excess. I can't touch the principal because of the trust terms, but I can direct how income beyond my basic needs is used. She gestured to the envelope. That's a proposal. a way to effectively split the inheritance despite the trust structure. I picked up the envelope, opened it. Inside was a formal document outlining a plan where excess trust income, estimated at $4,000 to $6,000 monthly, would be directed to an account in my name. Over time, it would accumulate to a substantial sum. Not as much as direct inheritance, but not nothing either. Why, I asked. Because they were wrong. Meredith's voice was steady. Mom and Dad were wrong to leave you nothing. They were wrong to assume that because you're stable, you don't deserve recognition. They were wrong to make their love feel conditional on crisis. You don't have to do this. The money is legally yours. The money is morally ours, plural. They were our parents. They should have been divided equally, or at least more fairly than all or nothing. She met my eyes. I know I can't fix 15 years of family dysfunction with a financial arrangement, but I can acknowledge that you got screwed, and I can try to make it less screwed. I stared at the document, then at my sister. You're really 4 months sober? 123 days. I go to meetings twice a day. I'm on medication that actually works for the first time in my life. I have a therapist who specializes in dual diagnosis. And I'm fucking terrified every single day that I'll relapse and prove everyone right about what a disaster I am. Meredith, I don't expect us to be close. I don't expect you to forgive me for 15 years of chaos or for getting an inheritance you deserved. But I am going to stay sober, and I am going to try to be the sister you deserved all along, even if you never want to see me. She turned to leave, then paused. The proposal needs your signature if you want to accept it. No pressure, but the option is there. After she left, I sat on the porch reading and rereading the document. It was thorough, legal, and completely voluntary on her part. She could have kept every dollar and been fully within her rights. Instead, she was trying to fix what our parents had broken. Simon found me there an hour later, the papers still in my hands. That's generous of her, he said after I explained. It's guilt. Maybe, but it's also accountability. She's taking responsibility for a situation she didn't create but benefited from. He sat beside me. The question is, are you ready to let her try? I don't know if I can trust it. What if she relapses? What if this is just another cycle of hope and disappointment? Then you'll know you gave her a chance, and she'll know that sobriety comes with the possibility of rebuilding what addiction destroyed. He took my hand. But Katie, you have to decide. Do you want to be right about her failure or open to her success? That question sat with me for days. Did I want to be right? Had I become so invested in my narrative of the overlooked, undervalued daughter that I couldn't accept a different story? The following week, I signed the document and sent it back to Mr. Weston. Not because I trusted Meredith completely, but because I wanted to see what happened if I loosened my grip on my anger just slightly. The income transfers started the next month. $4,800 deposited into an account in my name. Money that was technically Meredith's to keep, given voluntarily because she'd decided fairness mattered more than legal entitlement. I didn't call her to say thank you, not yet, but I stopped actively hoping she'd fail. Month 8. Meredith had been sober for 245 days. The income transfers had continued like clockwork, and I'd received an invitation to her place, our parents' house, now legally hers, for Thanksgiving. We don't have to go, Simon said when I showed him the card. I think maybe we do. Zoe had been asking more frequently about Aunt Meredith. She'd seen her grandmother's sister, my aunt, posting on Facebook about Meredith's sobriety milestones, celebrating her progress publicly in a way that made Zoe wonder why we weren't celebrating too. Is Aunt Meredith sick? She'd asked. Is that why we don't see her? How do you explain addiction to an 8-year-old? How do you explain that yes, it's an illness, but it's also choices? That yes, we should be compassionate, but compassion fatigue is real? That yes, family matters, but so do boundaries? You don't. You just say, it's complicated, and I'm still figuring out what our relationship looks like now. Thanksgiving dinner was awkward, but not catastrophic. Meredith had actually cooked, a full meal with side dishes and a pie. The house was clean, decorated, evidence of someone living rather than merely existing between crises. She'd set up photos throughout the rooms, our parents in various stages of life, pictures of Meredith and me as children, Back when things were simpler, before addiction and resentment and impossible choices. Photos of Zoe with her grandparents, documenting a relationship that had ended too soon. I've been going through their things, Meredith explained over dinner. Sorting, organizing, figuring out what to keep and what to let go. There are boxes for you in the garage, things I thought you'd want. After dinner, she led me to the garage where a dozen carefully labeled boxes waited. Mom's recipe cards, Dad's woodworking journals, family photo albums I'd assumed were lost, college yearbooks, baby books, evidence of lives lived before everything got complicated. You cataloged all this? I asked, overwhelmed. It's part of my program. Making amends isn't just apologizing, it's taking concrete action to repair harm. I can't give you back 15 years of family dysfunction, but I can give you the family history Mom and Dad would have wanted you to have. We carried boxes to my car in silence. As I was loading the last one, Meredith said quietly, I know you're still angry. I know this doesn't fix anything. But I need you to know, I'm not using. I'm not planning to use. I'm building an actual life for the first time since I was a teenager. I see that. Do you believe it? I looked at my sister, really looked at her, and saw someone I didn't fully recognize. Not the addict I'd been expecting to fail. Not the crisis I'd been preparing to manage from a distance. Just a woman trying hard to be better than she'd been. I'm trying to believe it, I said honestly. That's the best I can offer right now. That's enough. She smiled, and it reached her eyes in a way I couldn't remember seeing in years. That's more than enough. Year 2 brought changes I hadn't anticipated. Meredith got a job, part-time at first, then full-time, at a non-profit serving women in recovery. She started speaking at meetings, sharing her story, becoming the kind of advocate who could only exist because she'd walked through fire herself. The income transfers continued. By the second anniversary of our parents' deaths, I'd received nearly $120,000. Not the full inheritance I deserved, but substantial enough to matter. We'd paid off our mortgage early, started Zoe's college fund properly, taken a family vacation to Europe we couldn't have afforded otherwise. Money from my sister, voluntarily shared because she'd decided our parents' decision wasn't fair. I attended her 1-year sobriety celebration, then her 18-month. When she hit 2 years sober, I was the one who stood up in the meeting to tell strangers how proud I was of her. It felt strange in my mouth, that pride, because I was proud, but I was also still angry, still hurt by what our parents had done, still processing the complicated truth that Meredith's need had been real, my hurt was valid, and both things could be true simultaneously without negating each other. I think I'm ready to talk about it, I told my therapist. Really talk about it. Not just the inheritance, but the whole 15 years of feeling invisible while my sister was a disaster. So we talked about how being the stable child feels both like a blessing and a curse, how resentment builds slowly when your goodness is taken for granted, while someone else's crisis gets all the attention, how you can be happy for someone's recovery while also being angry that their addiction cost you your parents' focus for years, how all of it can be true, the love and the anger, the pride and the hurt, the relief that she's sober and the rage that it took our parents' death to get her there. What do you need from Meredith? My therapist asked. I don't know. An acknowledgement that it wasn't fair, that I suffered too, just differently, that being stable doesn't mean I didn't need my parents to see me. Have you told her that? I hadn't. Because victims of addiction aren't supposed to complain. The siblings who didn't use drugs aren't supposed to claim they were hurt too. The stable children are supposed to understand that of course they got less attention. Someone else needed it more. But maybe that was exactly the problem. Maybe someone needed to say out loud that the stable children are casualties too. Different casualties, but casualties nonetheless. The conversation happened on a Sunday afternoon in month 28. Meredith and I were sorting through more of our parents' belongings, deciding what to keep, what to donate, what to preserve for Zoe when she was older. Can I ask you something? I started. And can you promise not to get defensive? I'll try. She set down the box she was holding. What's up? When you were using, did you ever think about how it affected me? Not Mom and Dad, me specifically. Your sister who watched you almost die 6 times, who fielded the 3 a.m. panic calls, Who covered for you with relatives and helped create excuses for why you missed holidays or family events? Meredith was quiet for a long moment. Honestly, no. I was so focused on my own suffering that I couldn't see anyone else's. Which is selfish and terrible, but it's true. That's what I thought. But I see it now. I see how much you carried while getting no recognition for it. How you were expected to just be okay, be stable, be the good daughter while everything revolved around my latest crisis. She met my eyes. You were a casualty of my addiction too, just a different kind. Something in my chest loosened slightly. Thank you for saying that. I'm sorry, Katie. I'm sorry I took up all the air in the room for 15 years. I'm sorry our parents didn't see how much you needed acknowledgement too. I'm sorry the inheritance felt like one more time you were overlooked in favor of my needs. She paused. And I'm sorry it took me getting sober to be able to see any of that clearly. I'm sorry I wanted you to fail, I admitted. After the will reading, part of me hoped you'd relapse so I could be proven right that the trust was wasted on you. That's understandable. It's terrible. It's human. Meredith smiled sadly. You'd been watching me fail for 15 years and getting nothing but pain from it. Why wouldn't you expect more of the same? We sat with that honesty for a while. Two sisters who'd been shaped by the same family dysfunction in completely different ways. I don't want to be that person anymore, I said finally. The one who's so invested in being right about your failure that I can't celebrate your success. And I don't want to be the person whose needs eclipse everyone else's, who takes up all the space and leaves none for anyone else. So what do? We keep showing up, I guess. You keep letting me prove I'm different now. I keep making space for you to be angry and hurt and still healing. We figure out how to be sisters instead of an addict and her resentful sibling. 3 years after our parents died, Meredith is still sober. 1,095 days without using. A miracle in recovery terms, though she insists it's not a miracle. Just daily work, good medication, proper therapy, and the structure that the trust provided. The income transfers have continued. I've received over $180,000 in 3 years. We've invested most of it for Zoe's future, kept some for emergencies, and donated a portion to organizations serving families affected by addiction. Money from my sister. Still technically her inheritance, shared because she decided fairness mattered more than legal entitlement. I teach a workshop now at conferences for families of addicts. When the stable child becomes invisible, I tell our story, the inheritance that went entirely to my sister. The years of feeling overlooked, the rage that nearly destroyed our relationship, and the unexpected path to something like healing. Parents always ask, but how do you balance it? How do you give the crisis child what they need without abandoning the stable child? The answer is, you probably can't perfectly. Someone will always feel shortchanged. Someone will always carry resentment. The best you can do is see both children, acknowledge both needs, and try not to make the stable one feel punished for their stability. My parents failed at that balance. They saw Meredith's crisis so clearly, they couldn't see my quieter suffering. They addressed her urgent needs while assuming my less urgent ones could wait indefinitely. They made impossible choices that saved one daughter while wounding the other. But here's what I've learned. Their failure doesn't have to define my relationship with my sister. The inheritance structure they created doesn't have to be the final word on our worth or value. Meredith and I can write our own ending to a story our parents started but couldn't finish. She's still living in our parents' house, still working with women in recovery, still attending meetings and taking medication and doing the daily work of staying sober. She's dating someone who's also in recovery, building a relationship on honesty instead of enabling. I'm still processing the complicated grief of losing parents who loved me but didn't always see me. Still working through anger that resurfaces unexpectedly. Still learning to separate my parents' choices from my sister's worth. But I'm also learning to accept what our parents couldn't give us. Perfect fairness, equal attention, the ability to see both daughters simultaneously without one eclipsing the other. They were human, doing their best with an impossible situation, making choices that wounded one child while trying to save another. Meredith and I visit their graves together now. We bring flowers on holidays and their birthdays. We tell them about Zoe's accomplishments and Meredith's sobriety milestones. We've started being honest about our anger alongside our love. I'm still mad at you, I told their headstone on the 3rd anniversary of their deaths. You got it wrong. The inheritance, the attention, the assumption that stable means strong enough to be overlooked. You got it wrong, and I'm still mad. Me too, Meredith added. You enabled me for so long that getting sober required your death. That's fucked up, and I'm still processing it. We sat there, 2 daughters who'd been hurt in different ways by parents who'd loved them imperfectly. But we're figuring it out, I continued. Meredith and me, we're building something you didn't quite teach us. How to be family without someone being in crisis. How to love each other without someone being the hero and someone being the disaster. How to share resources fairly even when inheritance law says otherwise. The inheritance dispute that could have destroyed our relationship instead became the crisis that finally forced us to see each other clearly, not as the addict and the stable one, not as the crisis child and the overlooked one, just as 2 sisters trying to survive the complicated legacy of loving parents who didn't always love us equally. Meredith's trust still holds the bulk of the estate. Legally, technically, nothing has changed. But practically, morally, we've created our own distribution. One that acknowledges both of our needs and both of our worth. I got the financial recognition I deserved. She got the structure that keeps her alive. Together, we got something our parents couldn't give us, each other without crisis as the mediator. The money matters less than I thought it would. What matters more is that my sister saw the injustice and chose to address it. That she used her inheritance to build a life worth living instead of funding her death. That she made space for my anger and hurt alongside her recovery. That we both decided our relationship was worth more than our resentment. My parents left everything to my addict sister. What I did next was learn to redefine what inheritance actually means. Not just money or property, but patterns and wounds and the possibility of healing from both. Meredith's sobriety is the inheritance our parents hoped for. Our relationship is the inheritance they never imagined. And the life we're building together, honest, complicated, imperfect, but real, is the inheritance we're creating for ourselves. 3 years later, we're still here, still sober, still sisters, still figuring it out, still carrying our parents' complicated legacy while trying to create something better for the next generation. Zoe asks sometimes about the inheritance, about why Aunt Meredith lives in Grandma and Grandpa's house, about fairness and family, and why sometimes love doesn't look equal. I tell her the truth. That family is complicated. That fair isn't always equal, and equal isn't always fair. That sometimes the people who need the most get the most, and sometimes that's right, and sometimes it hurts anyway. But I also tell her this, that people can change, that addiction can be treated, that sisters can rebuild what parents broke, that inheritance isn't just what you receive but what you choose to do with it. Meredith chose recovery. I chose forgiveness. Together, we chose each other. That's the inheritance that actually mattered. The one our parents tried to give us through money, but that we had to create ourselves through honesty and grace and the hard work of learning to be family without someone being in crisis. The trust fund still exists. The legal distribution stands. But the real inheritance, the one that will define our family for the next generation, is the relationship we built from the ashes of our parents' impossible choices. And that inheritance, we're splitting it equally. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe to the channel. Share your experiences with addiction in families, inheritance disputes, or being the stable child in the comments below. Remember, families affected by addiction have multiple victims, and all of them deserve recognition and healing. Until next time.